You book an Airbnb for a perfect getaway, but the house has a secret. What would you do if you heard scratching from inside the walls? Not rats, something else. One couple decided to investigate, and what they found wasn't just left behind, it was waiting. This is the true, terrifying story of the hidden room and the host who collected more than just rent. Stay till the end because the most shocking discovery happens in the final minutes. If you love stories that will make you think twice about your next vacation, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss what's coming next. The winding mountain road that led to the town of Havenwood was a postcard cliché. For Maya, clutching the passenger door handle as her boyfriend, Liam, navigated another hairpin turn, it was a little too perfect. They were city people through and through, escaping the relentless drone of Chicago for a week of supposed tranquility in a rustic cabin they'd found on Airbnb. The listing, titled The Whispering Pine Chalet, boasted 5 stars, glowing reviews about the cozy fireplace, and a host named Elias who was praised for his responsiveness and charm. The photos showed a quaint, A-frame structure nestled in a dense forest, looking like it was pulled from a fairy tale. As they finally pulled into the gravel driveway, the reality was even more isolating than the picture suggested. The trees pressed in on all sides, their branches interlocking overhead to form a dense green canopy that swallowed the afternoon sun, casting the cabin in a perpetual twilight. "It's remote," Maya said, her voice small. Liam, ever the optimist, grinned. "That's the point, babe. No sirens, no neighbors, just us and the whispering pines." He hopped out, stretching his long legs, and breathed in the sense of damp earth and pine needles. The air was crisp and cool, a welcome change from the city's humid smog. Maya followed, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. The cabin itself was beautiful, with dark wood siding and a wide porch, but there was an undeniable sense of age to it, a feeling of being watched by the blank window panes. The key was exactly where Elias said it would be, under a fake rock by the door. Inside, the cabin was a time capsule. A huge stone fireplace dominated the main room, flanked by worn leather armchairs. A dusty taxidermy owl stared down from a high beam, its glass eyes seeming to follow their every move. The furniture was heavy, dark oak, and the air was thick with the smell of wood smoke and something else, something faintly metallic and musty, like old pennies and forgotten things. "See, it's perfect," Liam declared, dropping their bags on the floor and heading straight for the kitchen, already planning their first meal. Maya lingered in the living room, running a hand over the rough-hewn mantel. The reviews mentioned Elias leaving a personal welcome note, but there was nothing. No note, no bottle of local wine, just the oppressive silence and the feeling that the cabin was holding its breath, waiting. She tried to shake it off, blaming the long drive and her own overactive imagination. It was just an old house in the woods. Old houses made noises. Old houses had strange smells. But as she stood there, a sudden, inexplicable chill traced a path down her spine, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't entirely alone. The first night passed in a blur of unpacking, a simple pasta dinner, and an early bedtime, the exhaustion of the drive pulling them into a deep, dreamless sleep. It was on the second night that the sound began. It was faint at first, so subtle that Maya thought she was imagining it. A soft, rhythmic scratching. She sat up in bed, straining her ears in the pitch-black room. The only other sounds were Liam's steady breathing beside her and the gentle hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. She nudged Liam. "Did you hear that?" He grumbled, half asleep. "Hear what? The ghost of a lumberjack?" He rolled over, pulling the covers tighter around him. Maya lay back down, her heart thudding against her ribs. She told herself it was a branch scraping against the roof or a squirrel trying to get into the attic. Common sounds for a cabin in the woods. But the sound was too regular, too close. It seemed to be coming from the wall right beside their bed, the main interior wall that separated the bedroom from the living area. Scratch. Pause. Scratch, scratch. Pause. It wasn't the frantic scurrying of a mouse. It was deliberate, measured. like fingernails dragging slowly across drywall. The next morning, she brought it up over coffee. "I'm serious, Liam. There was a weird noise last night. It sounded like it was inside the wall." Liam, pouring milk into his cereal, chuckled. "Probably a raccoon or a giant mutant squirrel. We're in their house, remember? I'll check the outside for any holes later." He was trying to be reassuring, but Maya saw the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. That day, they went for a hike, trying to embrace the nature they'd come for. The forest was breathtakingly beautiful, but Maya couldn't fully relax. Every snapping twig, every rustle in the underbrush made her jump. When they returned to the cabin that evening, the cozy atmosphere from the first day had evaporated, replaced by a subtle tension. As dusk settled, blanketing the woods in deep shadows, the silence inside the cabin felt heavier, more expectant. They built a fire, the crackling flames doing little to warm the chill that had settled deep in Maya's bones. They tried to watch a movie on their laptop, but she couldn't focus. She kept glancing at the wall, waiting. And right on cue, as the clock on the mantel struck midnight, it started again. Scratch, pause, scratch, scratch. This time, Liam heard it too. He muted the movie, his playful demeanor gone. They sat in silence, listening together. The sound was clearer now, more defined. It was undeniably coming from inside the wall, about halfway up from the floor. It wasn't an animal. The rhythm was too patient, too methodical. It was a sound that didn't belong. By the third night, the sound had become an unwelcome guest, an insidious presence in their quiet retreat. It was no longer just a faint scratching. It was a persistent, grating noise that started an hour after sunset and continued intermittently until dawn. Sleep became a battle they were both losing. Liam, whose pragmatism had initially dismissed the noise as a pest problem, was now visibly on edge. "That's it," he declared on the morning of their fourth day, his eyes dark with sleep deprivation. "I'm not spending another night listening to that. I'm finding the source." Maya, though terrified, felt a surge of relief. The not knowing was worse than any potential discovery. Armed with a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, Liam began his investigation. He started by knocking on the wall, listening to the hollow thuds echo back. The wall was covered in a dated, floral print wallpaper that was peeling slightly at the seams. "It sounds hollower right here," he said, pressing his ear against a spot about 4 feet from the floor. He ran his hand over the surface, his fingers tracing the pattern of faded roses. Then he stopped. Wait a minute. Underneath a loose flap of wallpaper, his fingers had found an edge. It wasn't a crack in the plaster. It was a perfectly straight, almost invisible seam. His curiosity now fully ignited, he carefully peeled back a larger section of the wallpaper. Underneath, faint lines in the drywall revealed the outline of a small, square panel, about 2 feet by 2 feet. It had been plastered over and papered with meticulous care, designed to be completely hidden. There was no knob or handle, only a tiny indentation at the bottom edge. "It's a door," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "A hidden compartment." Liam looked at her, his expression a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The allure of a secret space, a mystery to be solved, warred with the unsettling reason for their search. He took out his multi-tool and used the small pry bar to wedge into the seam. For a moment, it resisted, sealed shut by years of paint and humidity. Then, with a soft groan of protesting wood, the panel gave way, swinging inward on hidden hinges into the darkness of the wall cavity. A wave of cool, stagnant air washed over them, carrying the same musty, metallic scent Maya had noticed when they first arrived. Only now it was much stronger. It smelled of dust, decay, and something else, something organic and vaguely sweet. Liam shone the flashlight into the opening. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a small, dusty space, no bigger than a medicine cabinet. It wasn't empty. Sitting on a small wooden shelf inside was a single object, a small, leather-bound book. It looked ancient, its cover warped and its pages yellowed with age. They stared at it, the scratching from the previous nights momentarily forgotten, replaced by a new and more profound sense of dread. This wasn't a space for plumbing or electrical wires. This was a hiding place, and someone had left something behind. The silence in the room was thick and heavy as they stared into the dark cavity. The small, leather-bound book sat on its dusty shelf, looking less like a forgotten item and more like an offering. Liam reached in, his hand hesitating for a fraction of a second before his fingers closed around the book's spine. He pulled it out, blowing a cloud of gray dust from its surface. It was a diary. The leather was cracked and worn, and a faded gold embossing on the cover simply read, "My thoughts." There was no name, no date. Liam handed it to Maya, whose hands were shaking as she took it. The book felt cold, unnaturally so, as if it had absorbed the chill from within the wall. They sat on the edge of the bed, the flashlight propped up between them, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. Maya opened the cover. The first page had a single name written in elegant, looping cursive, Clara Abbott. The first several entries were dated from a summer 2 years prior. They were mundane, filled with the simple joys of a solo vacation. Clara wrote about the beauty of Havenwood, the peacefulness of the forest, and her delight in the charming little cabin. She described the host, Elias, as a kind, older gentleman who had given her tips on the best hiking trails. The early entries painted a picture of a woman who was happy, relaxed, and completely at ease. Day 4, one entry read, "The silence here is a balm for the soul. I spent the entire afternoon on the porch reading, with no sound but the wind in the pines. I feel I could stay here forever." As Maya turned the pages, a subtle shift began to occur in the tone of the entries. The joyful observations started to be interspersed with notes of unease. Day 8. "A strange thing happened last night. I heard a noise, a sort of tapping from the bedroom wall. Probably just the house settling, but it was difficult to get back to sleep." Maya's blood ran cold. She looked at Liam, his face grim in the flashlight's glow. She continued reading, her voice a low murmur. Clara's entries grew more frequent and more frantic. She described the sound in detail, the same rhythmic scratching they had heard. She wrote about feeling watched, about the way the shadows in the cabin seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. Day 11. "The scratching is worse. It's not an animal. I'm sure of it. It's methodical, patient. I messaged Elias about it, but he brushed it off. He said this old house is full of character." His response felt cold, dismissive. The cheerful, carefree woman from the first few pages was gone, replaced by someone paranoid and terrified. The elegant cursive became a spiky, hurried scrawl. They felt like voyeurs, peering into the slow unraveling of a stranger's sanity. This diary wasn't just forgotten, it was a record of terror, deliberately hidden away. And the most terrifying part was that Clara's story was becoming their own. A cold dread had settled over the room, far more chilling than the mountain air outside. The diary lay open on the bed, Clara's frantic words a stark warning from the past. "We have to call him," Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. "We have to tell Elias what we found." Liam, who was usually the one to take charge, looked uncertain. "And say what?" "Hey, we tore a hole in your wall and found a creepy diary from a previous guest who seems to have lost her mind?" He ran a hand through his hair. "He'll think we're crazy, or he'll kick us out and charge us for the damages." "I don't care, Liam. That woman was terrified. She mentions him, his dismissive attitude. Maybe he knows something." The scratching from the wall felt like a prelude, an opening act. Finding the diary was the main event. Maya felt a desperate need for a rational explanation, and Elias was the only one who could provide it. Reluctantly, Liam agreed. Maya picked up her phone, her fingers fumbling as she opened the Airbnb app. She composed the message carefully, trying to sound calm and rational. "Hi, Elias. Hope you're well. We're having a great time, but we've been hearing a persistent scratching sound in the bedroom wall. We got concerned it might be a pest and found a small loose panel. Inside, we found a diary that seems to have been left by a previous guest named Clara Abbott. We're a bit unsettled by it. Can you shed any light on this?" They sent the message and waited. The minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. The silence from their phones was almost as unnerving as the sounds from the wall. They put the diary back in the compartment, a silent agreement passing between them that they didn't want it out in the open. Closing the panel felt like shutting a tomb. Finally, Maya's phone buzzed. Elias had replied. His message was short and devoid of the friendly emojis he'd used in their previous communications. "There is no panel in the wall. You must be mistaken. Old houses make noises. Please respect the property and do not damage the walls. I will be by in the morning to inspect." The message was a brick wall. The denial was so blunt, so absolute, it was more damning than any confession. He wasn't surprised or curious or apologetic. He was telling them they didn't see what they saw. He was telling them to stop looking. "He's lying," Liam said, the color draining from his face. "He knows about the panel. He has to." The host's strange, almost hostile response transformed their unease into genuine fear. Elias wasn't just a quirky, hands-off host. He was part of the mystery. His impending visit no longer felt like a customer service call. It felt like a threat. They were isolated, miles from the nearest town, in a cabin owned by a man who was actively lying to them about a secret compartment in the wall. And he was coming for an inspection? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through Maya. What exactly would he be inspecting? The wall or them?
Elias's message hung in the air between them, a digital threat that made the remote cabin feel like a cage. His denial was so blatant it could only be a lie, and his announcement of an impending inspection felt ominous. "He's coming here," Maya whispered, pacing the small living room. "What do? We can't just put the wallpaper back up and pretend this never happened." Liam was staring at the wall, his jaw tight. The initial thrill of discovery had curdled into a primal fear. "No," he said, his voice low and determined. "We're not going to pretend. If he's hiding this, he's probably hiding more. I want to know what else is in there." It was a reckless idea, born of adrenaline and a desperate need for answers. But Maya found herself nodding in agreement. Waiting passively for Elias to arrive felt unbearable. They needed to know what they were dealing with. Liam pried the panel open again, the groan of the wood louder this time, more mournful. The stale, musty air filled the room once more. The single shelf that held Clara's diary was just the first layer. Liam shone his phone's flashlight deeper into the cavity. It was deeper than they thought, extending back at least another foot. "There's something else back there," he murmured, reaching his arm deep into the darkness. His fingers brushed against something cool and papery. He pulled it out. It was a small stack of old black and white photographs held together by a brittle rubber band. They huddled together, poring over the images under the narrow beam of the flashlight. They were pictures of people, couples mostly, all posing in or around the cabin. One showed a smiling couple on the porch swing, another a family having a picnic by the creek. They looked like old Airbnb listing photos, except they were grainy, personal snapshots. In every single photograph, the faces had been meticulously, violently scratched out, leaving behind a horrifying web of white gashes where their features should have been. It was a desecration, an act of rage. Who were these people? Were they all previous guests? Tucked behind the photos was a small velvet pouch. With trembling fingers, Maya untied the drawstring and emptied its contents into her palm. A cascade of small personal trinkets fell out. A single silver earring, a tarnished cufflink, a cheap plastic barrette with a faded pink bow, and a man's plain wedding band. They were trophies, souvenirs taken from the faceless people in the photographs. The scratching from the walls suddenly made a new, terrifying kind of sense. It wasn't a sound of something trying to get in. It was the sound of something left behind, something trapped. As Liam reached back into the compartment one last time, his hand hit something solid. He pulled out a small, handcrafted wooden box. It was a music box. He slowly lifted the lid. Instead of a dancing ballerina, there was a single, tightly wound lock of blonde hair. The music that tinkled out was a haunting, off-key lullaby, a childish melody that was utterly incongruous with the horror they were uncovering. They were standing in a shrine, a collection of stolen memories. And Clara's diary wasn't the end of her story. It was just the first piece of her that had been collected. The tinny, discordant melody of the music box filled the suffocating silence of the bedroom. It was a chilling soundtrack to their horrific discovery. Each item they pulled from the wall cavity was a breadcrumb leading them deeper into a nightmare. They had moved beyond simple unease into a realm of tangible, calculated malevolence. Elias wasn't just a strange host, he was a predator, and this cabin was his hunting ground. The collection of defaced photos and personal trinkets proved it. But Clara's diary still felt different. It was a narrative, a voice from the void. They needed to read it again, to scour it for any detail they might have missed, any clue that could explain the true nature of this place. Liam retrieved the diary while Maya carefully placed the other items back into the wall, a deep-seated revulsion making her skin crawl. She didn't want this evidence out in the open, as if the objects themselves carried a contagion of fear. They sat together on the couch, the laptop open between them, its bright screen a small beacon of modernity in the rustic, terrifying cabin. They had searched online for Clara Abbott and Havenwood, but found nothing. No missing person reports, no news articles, nothing. It was as if she had vanished. Maya began to read the diary again, this time aloud, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. They went past the initial entries and focused on the last days, the pages where Clara's fear was most palpable. Her handwriting grew messier, the ink smudged in places as if by tears. Day 15. Elias stopped by today, unannounced. He said he was just checking on the propane tank, but he stayed for almost an hour. He kept asking me questions, personal questions, about my life back home, my family, if anyone knew I was here. I tried to be vague. He has this way of looking at you, a sort of hungry stillness. His eyes, they don't blink enough. When he left, he told me he had a welcome gift for me, something he gives to his favorite guests. He said he'd leave it for me tomorrow. Maya paused, taking a shaky breath. A welcome gift. Liam's face was pale. Like the things in the box? Trophies? Maya kept reading. The next entry was the last one in the book. It was short, just a few lines scrawled diagonally across the page, as if written in a great hurry. Day 16. He left the gift on the porch. It's a small wooden doll. It's carved to look just like me. My hair, the dress I was wearing yesterday. He carved my face into the wood. How could he know my face so well? It's in the wall now, with the others. He wants to keep a piece of us. He told me the house likes to remember. The scratching isn't the house. It's them. It's the other guests. They're trying to warn me. They're trying to get out. That was it. The diary ended there. A sudden, chilling emptiness. What happened to Clara after she wrote those words? The implication was suffocatingly clear. She never left. Her diary, the lock of her hair, and now the mention of a doll made in her image, they were all part of Elias's collection. And the scratching? It wasn't a ghost. It was a warning. a chorus of trapped souls scraping away at the walls of their prison. They finally understood. The wall wasn't a hiding place for things, it was a cage for people. The final entry of Clara's diary echoed in the room, changing everything. The scratching they had heard was not a prelude to a threat, it was the threat itself. It was the sound of trapped souls, of previous guests who, like Clara, had been collected by Elias. The cabin was not just a rental property, it was a mausoleum. The defaced photos, the stolen trinkets, the lock of hair, they were gravestones, markers of the lives Elias had harvested. Maya felt a wave of nausea. She thought of Clara, alone and terrified, realizing the true nature of her host and his gifts. She imagined her hiding the diary in the wall, a final, desperate message in a bottle before she was consumed by whatever fate Elias had planned for her. "The doll," Liam breathed, his eyes wide with horror. "She said he carved a doll to look just like her. She put it in the wall with the others." His gaze shot to the open panel. There was more in there, deeper inside. The thought of reaching back into that dark, crowded space was terrifying, but the need to know, to see the final piece of Clara's story, was more powerful than their fear. This time, Maya was the one to act. She couldn't let Liam face it alone. She grabbed the flashlight, her hand surprisingly steady, and knelt before the opening. The air that seeped out was colder now, heavy with the scent of old wood and something cloyingly sweet, like wilted flowers. She angled the beam of light as far back as it would go. Behind where the music box had been, the cavity deepened, turning into a narrow, vertical shaft. And there, nestled at the very back, was a small pile of objects. They were dolls, small, crudely carved wooden figures, no bigger than her hand. There were at least a dozen of them, each one distinct. One was clearly a man with short hair and broad shoulders etched into the wood. Another was a woman with long flowing hair. A third was a small child. Each one was a unique effigy, a tiny wooden ghost. And on the top of the pile sat one that was clearly newer than the rest. The wood was a lighter color, the carvings sharper. It was a doll of a woman with her hair tied in a bun, wearing what looked like a hiking outfit. It was Clara. Maya reached in, her fingers brushing against the cold, rough wood. She picked up the Clara doll, her heart hammering against her ribs. As she brought it out into the light, she saw the horrifying detail Clara had described. The face, though crudely carved, was unmistakably a portrait, with an expression of pure terror captured in the grain of the wood. And then she saw the worst part. Pushed deep into the doll's tiny wooden heart was a long, rust-colored nail. It was a totem, a voodoo effigy, a way of binding the guest's spirit to the house. Each doll represented a person Elias had trapped here. This was his true collection. He wasn't collecting their things, he was collecting their souls. Holding the small, terrifying effigy of Clara, the full weight of their situation crashed down on Maya and Liam. This was not a ghost story they had stumbled upon. They were in the middle of a horror movie, and the monster was real. His name was Elias, and he was coming to inspect the property in the morning. Every object in the wall was a piece of a gruesome puzzle, and the Clara doll was the final, damning clue. Elias didn't just take souvenirs. He performed some kind of ritual, binding his victims to the cabin. The scratching was their desperate, eternal attempt to escape. The cabin, with its cozy fireplace and charming porch, was a Venus flytrap, and they had walked right into it. Liam's face was a mask of cold fury and fear. "He's not just a creep," he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. "He's a killer." The word hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. They had no proof that would stand up in court, just a collection of strange objects and a diary that would be dismissed as fiction. But they knew. In their bones, they knew that Clara and the owners of the other dolls had met a terrible end within these walls. Suddenly, A new thought, colder and sharper than any before, pierced through Maya's panic. Elias gave gifts to his favorite guests. He carved dolls of them. He had been polite and charming in his messages to them before they arrived. What if he'd already decided that they were his favorites? What if he was already carving two new dolls, one with Maya's long brown hair, the other with Liam's strong jawline? The thought was paralyzing. They were next. At the back of the dark compartment, behind the pile of dolls, Liam spotted one last thing. It was a small, handcrafted wooden box, more ornate than the music box. He reached for it, his movements slow and deliberate. He pulled it out and placed it on the bed. It wasn't locked. He lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a single, tarnished silver locket. It was beautiful and antique. Liam picked it up. It opened with a faint click. On one side was a tiny, professionally shot photograph of Clara, the kind you'd see on a driver's license or an ID badge. She was smiling, but her eyes looked tired. On the other side, where a picture of a loved one should be, was a minuscule, tightly rolled up piece of paper. With trembling fingers, Liam used the tip of a key to unroll it. There were only 7 words, written in the same spidery script as the name on the diary's first page. It was a quote, a final message left by Clara. It read, "Now you are part of the house." It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a curse. They were no longer just visitors. By finding the secret, they had become part of the story, part of the collection. The 7 words on the tiny scroll of paper, "Now you are part of the house," acted like a starter pistol. The paralysis of fear shattered, replaced by a flood of pure survivalist adrenaline. They were no longer investigators in a mystery. They were prey, and the hunter was on his way. "Pack, now," Liam said, his voice a low, urgent command. He didn't need to say it twice. There was no more discussion, no more hypothesizing. The only goal was to get out. They moved with a frantic, silent efficiency, throwing clothes into their suitcases, not bothering to fold them. Maya grabbed their laptops, chargers, and wallets, her mind racing. The nearest town was Havenwood, a 30-minute drive down that winding, pitch-black mountain road. Their cell service was spotty at best. Even if they called the police, what would they say? They couldn't wait here for help to arrive. They had to leave. As Maya stuffed her toiletries into a bag, her eyes fell on the wall. The panel was still wide open, the dark cavity like a gaping wound, its secrets exposed. "What do we do about this?" she asked, her voice tight with panic. "Do we take it? The diary? The dolls?" Liam stopped, his hands full of shirts. He looked at the macabre collection. Taking it felt right, like liberating the souls Elias had trapped. But it also felt incredibly dangerous. It was evidence, yes, but carrying it felt like carrying a curse. "No," he said finally. "We leave it. We put everything back, close it up, and get out. If we take it, he'll know we know. He might come after us. This way, maybe, he'll just think we were scared off by the noise." It was a slim hope, but it was all they had. Working together, they carefully placed each horrifying object back into the wall cavity. The dolls, the trinkets, the faceless photos, and finally, Clara's diary. Placing the locket back in felt like a betrayal. As Liam pushed the panel shut, a final, distinct sound came from deep within the wall. A sharp, desperate scrape. It was louder and more insistent than ever before. A final, pleading cry. "Don't leave us here." They ignored it, taping the wallpaper flat back down as best they could. It looked messy, obvious, but they had no time to be neat. Grabbing their bags, they rushed to the front door. Liam paused with his hand on the knob, listening. The cabin was silent again, but the silence was different now. It was the heavy, watchful silence of a predator.
Every shadow seemed to stretch toward them. The taxidermy owl on the beam looked down with accusatory, all-knowing eyes. They burst out onto the porch, the cold night air a shock to their lungs. They didn't look back. They threw their bags in the car, the crunch of gravel under their feet sounding like gunshots in the stillness. As the engine roared to life, Maya risked a glance back at the cabin. For a split second, she thought she saw a light flicker in the upstairs window, a pale face watching them go. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Liam slammed the car into reverse and peeled out of the driveway, spraying gravel in his wake. As they sped down the dark, twisting road away from the Whispering Pines chalet, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't escaping. They were just being given a head start.
The drive back down the mountain was a terrifying ordeal in itself. Every shadow that flickered across the road looked like a figure. Every pair of reflecting eyes on the roadside could have been him watching them flee. Liam drove with a white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. Maya kept her phone in her hand, watching the signal bars blink in and out of existence, praying for a consistent connection to call for help. They didn't speak. There were no words for the horror they had just escaped. The silence was filled with the lingering images from the wall. The scratched-out faces, the crude wooden dolls, Clara's terrified final words. They were branded into their minds. When they finally hit the main highway and the comforting glow of streetlights, they pulled over at the first all-night gas station. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, they looked at each other for the first time since leaving the cabin. They were pale, trembling, and looked years older than they had that morning. They called the police. The dispatcher listened patiently to their frantic, disjointed story of a hidden panel, a diary, and dolls. They gave the address, Elias's name, and every detail they could remember. The dispatcher promised to send a sheriff's deputy to do a welfare check on the property, but his tone was laced with skepticism. A creepy Airbnb host and some weird folk art in a wall wasn't exactly a top priority crime. The next day, a detective from the Havenwood Sheriff's Department called them. He sounded tired and annoyed. The deputies had visited the chalet. The host, Elias, was there. He had been cooperative, even charming. He explained that the couple from Chicago had been spooked by the sounds of an old house and had left in the middle of the night. The deputies searched the property. They found nothing. There was no loose wallpaper, no hidden panel in the bedroom wall. It was, the detective said, solid plaster. The listing for the Whispering Pines Chalet was removed from Airbnb by that afternoon. Elias's host profile vanished without a trace. It was as if he and the cabin had simply dissolved back into the woods. There was no follow-up, no further investigation. To the world, Maya and Liam were just another pair of city folk who couldn't handle the quiet of the country. But they knew what they saw. They were left with a story no one would believe and a creeping paranoia that followed them home. They moved to a new apartment, a modern high-rise in the heart of the city, surrounded by steel, glass, and the constant noise of a million people. They thought the anonymity and the lack of creaking floorboards would bring them peace. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the city finally holds its breath, Maya hears something. It's a faint, familiar sound coming from the wall behind their bed. A soft, rhythmic scratching. And she wonders if they ever truly escaped, or if a piece of them was left behind in that cabin, collected and kept. She wonders if, in the dark woods of Havenwood, Elias is carving 2 new dolls, adding them to his collection, waiting for his next favorite guests. What do you think was in the walls? Was it all in their heads, or did something follow them from that house? Let us know your theories in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story gave you chills, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more disturbing stories you won't find anywhere else. Stay safe out there.